Welcome back to the Talk with Maynard Podcast, the podcast about motivation, awareness, disabilities, world problems, and cars.
This week, we're going to be talking about the fall of gas-powered cars and our beloved internal combustion engine.
Let's get straight to the discussion. Let's start this podcast off with some background information. All this information comes from an article by the New York Times. These are direct quotes from that article.
There are 250 million cars, SUVs, vans, and pickups on America's roads today. The vast majority run on gasoline. Fewer than 1% are electric.
Automakers are now shifting to electric vehicles, which could make up 1/4 of new sales by 2035.
At that point, only 13% of vehicles on the road would be electric, because older cars can stick around for a decade or two.
If the United States wanted to move to a fully electric fleet by 2050 to meet President Biden's goal of net zero emissions, then sales of gasoline-powered vehicles would likely have to end altogether by 2035.
We're going to take a quick break, and then we'll be back with our discussion after Guess That Car Sound.
Now it's time for Guess That Car Sound. We're going to do Guess That Car Sound a little different. This time me and my dad are both going to pick a car that we agree on, and we will play the sound. After we play the sound, we'll ask you, the viewer or the listener, to comment on what you think the car is in the comment section below. We'll then pause for a brief moment to allow you to post your comment. Once this minute's up, we will play the video featuring the car.
Got that? Great. Here's the sound.
Now we'll pause for a brief moment while you comment on what you think the car sound is from.
And the sound is from a Ford Model T. Here's the video.
That's it for this Guess That Car Sound. We are going to get back to the discussion. Okay, we're back to discuss electric cars taking over gas-powered cars.
So the big thing why they want to transition from gas to electric is for the sake of pollution and less carbon dioxide and greenhouse gases.
Yeah.
Or at least the perceived reduction.
Mm-hmm. The perceived reduction. And they're starting to make deadlines for this kind of thing. And it sounds great and all, but I think the deadlines are moving too fast, and I don't think it's actually going to happen as quick as we think it is.
Yeah, I don't think it can quite be there. One of the, I guess, from what we've seen, in gasoline cars are almost to the point that they can't really make them much more efficient. They're still tweaking, they're still doing things, and we know that we know they can be more efficient, but there comes a point that the cost is too great that a consumer couldn't buy a car that's uber efficient. You're telling me about F1 cars the other night. That's what I'm thinking of.
Yeah, the F1 cars, they are real fuel efficient. F1 cars are probably the most fuel efficient car on the planet. They have 800 horsepower and they have to run all out, but they are not allowed to refuel during a race. So they race for 2 hours flat out, and they have to be able to be as fuel efficient as possible. But Formula One cars cost like $65 million for just the car, and the only reason why it costs that much is because they're so fuel efficient.
Yeah, the Cody showed me a video, and just the engine was like $11 million or something like that. And I'm sure that includes research and everything that goes into it.
Mm-hmm.
But we're talking about, what'd you say, a 2-point-something liter engine?
Like a 2-point-something liter V6 engine with an
Which is
electric
small,
motor.
really small engine. It's a hybrid electric, but it has 1,000 horsepower.
Mm-hmm. Up to
1,000 horsepower, and can go 2 hours flat out. So that's, the technology can be there to make a super efficient gasoline engine,
Mm-hmm.
but the cost, there has to be a cost trade-off there, and they just couldn't do it. Where you and I, the consumer, could buy something that's that efficient.
And another thing that sounds great, well, electric cars, they sound good and different things, but I still don't think we've quite got to the point where it's feasible to drive them all the time. I mean, you run out of gas in a gasoline car, you go to a gas station, gas pump, 5 minutes you're filled up and ready to go. Well, an electric car, it takes 35 to 45 minutes, so the car companies are trying to say if they're charging really fast, get a bite to eat and they'll be ready to go. Well, not everyone has time to sit there for 35 minutes. If it's an emergency, you go outside and your car's charged at 10%. How are you ever going to make it in time?
Yeah. A quick gas stop can be 5 to 10 minutes if you just splash and go, and if that's all you have to do, and you have to find charging stations.
Mm-hmm.
They're not, of course, they're adding more all the time. That they are, but if you were to take a trip in your electric car, you have to plan your route, and you have to plan your stops and your fuel stops or your recharging stops,
Mm-hmm.
because they're not everywhere on every corner like you can buy gasoline at this point.
Yeah, and it's getting easy enough for electric cars to leisurely drive them. Like you're like, oh, I want to go on a road trip with an electric car. Well, yes, you can do it because it's not an emergency. You can find out where your stops are, and if you're on a vacation or something, you may have 30 minutes to eat or whatever. But let's say you had to get to the hospital because someone's sick or whatever. You ain't going to be able to jump into your electric car at 10% charge and expect to make it there real fast.
So one improvement that we've seen in electric cars, and they continue to improve, is range. A few years back, you couldn't go a couple hundred miles if you were lucky on a charge on the best cars, and now they're getting 300-400 miles on the range.
And the newest Tesla out right now can do like nearly 500 miles range.
So you get into a gas or a diesel powered engine as far as your range goes, where it was indeed much shorter. In fact, electric cars just a few years back were probably mainly city commuters, because the range just wasn't there really to take a trip. One thing I saw just this past week, I think it was a picture, and it was somewhere in Europe, I believe. I don't think it's here in the States. But it was a line of electric cars of Teslas, I think, or some other, and they were at a charging station, but there were so many in line that even with a 30 to 45 minute, it was taking 2.5 hours.
Yeah.
To get through the line, because they were lined up 4 or 5 cars deep at least, and when each of them has to be plugged in for 30 or 45 minutes, your 30-minute lunch break. Well, now you're killing 2.5 hours.
And another thing too, a reason why we're still, I think, so far away from electric cars compared to what people think, is they have yet to make charging systems the same for all cars. Ford has a different charging system. Chevy has a different charging system. Tesla has a different charging system. And that's what makes it hard to find charging areas. Like, you can't take the new Mustang Mach-E, and you can't take it to a Tesla charger, plug it in and charge it. And one thing I don't quite understand about that is Tesla said any car company can use their chargers. So I don't know why not all car companies are using Tesla chargers. I guess Tesla's kind of an eclectic company that not many people want to work with or something, but
Well, if I were guessing, there's Tesla's saying that they can use it, but that I'm sure doesn't mean that they're freely giving.
You have to partner with Tesla.
Yeah, you're gonna have to pay Tesla to use their technology, and maybe that point is too high. From what I've seen, of course, Ford is quickly jumping in the game, but besides Tesla, and it's a small brand, but Porsche has their new electric cars, and they were refused to partner with Tesla, didn't they? Anybody.
They refused. Volkswagen, it kind of wants to be their own thing.
Exactly.
And that's what Porsche is. But I'll let Daddy explain one thing that a lot of people don't think about is how whenever they start to computerize cars, that they realized in a hurry that all cars had to have the same system.
Well, exactly. Electronic fuel injection really became the norm and the standard in the mid to late 80s. In 1985, you still had a lot of cars with carburetors. In 86 and especially in 87, well, those were quickly going away, and you had really most cars going to electronic fuel injection, which is computer controlled. Now, in that time in the late 80s or all through the 80s and into the early 90s, every car manufacturer had their own computer system. If you had a Ford, then you had to have the computer to test a Ford. If you had a Chevrolet, a General Motors car, you had to have their computer. If you had an import. So in the early 90s, they came out with a standardized system. They called it OBD2, Onboard Diagnostics 2. And so every car used the same plug underneath the dash and similar software to do diagnostics. And I think that started in 94, I believe.
So it took years for them
It took
years for them to make that. And it's funny too, they're like, we're going to get rid of all gas-powered cars. Well, there's still cars driving around the road today that don't have an OBD2.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's still, they still haven't made it, with that. So, I don't know how they expect by 2035 to be emissions net zero.
Yeah.
It's just crazy. But we talked a lot now about why gas cars are better. But I also want to discuss how insane electric cars are and how they're really giving gas-powered cars a run for their money. The first thing, and there's actually going to be another podcast we're going to do later a little more on how fast cars are, but they are insanely quick. And you have electric cars now doing 0 to 60 in 2 seconds flat. And so they're much faster, and I was watching a video of one of my YouTubers the other day with the new Grand Cherokee that's coming out, and they have gas-powered engines. And he said they just feel so sluggish. They feel so sluggish, and the engines are so old. He said they'd feel so much quicker if they had some electric assistance. They'd feel more like a modern car. He says they don't feel as modern no more because they're so sluggish.
And that's the hybrid system, which, just some background there. I guess the Toyota Prius, everybody knows what that is. That was probably the first really major hybrid car that could run on gas or electric. And so hybrid is gas and electric. But now, as much as extending range on a lot of cars, it's about increasing performance. So the electric gives the instant power and instant torque to the gasoline engine, and they work together.
And electricity has recently made its way into luxury cars, and they say electricity is what luxury cars should have been doing for a long time. They say it's just so quiet and it's so smooth, and you have all these different tributes of a electric car that are so good, just the quiet, and they're smooth, and they're also not as much maintenance. There's not as many moving parts that can break.
Which is true. That's why so many things are electronic these days. Electronics have gotten more reliable.
Mm.
A lot of people in the past didn't want electric stuff; they want mechanical. But mechanical does break down, where electric typically doesn't, because again, like you said, there's not that many moving parts.
Mm-hmm.
Electric car, you don't have to have an oil change. You don't have to have a lot of things that a gasoline-powered car does.
Mm-hmm. And last thing I really want to discuss is that electric cars are coming. They may not become, like we discussed, not as fast as we think they are, but there's a lot of automotive purists out there that just will not give into it. They just like they just don't want to accept it. Well, it's inevitably going to happen. One day, probably, maybe not in Daddy's lifetime, but like in my lifetime, there ain't going to be gas-powered cars no more at some point. You ain't going to be able to buy a brand new gas-powered car. So you need to realize that that's inevitable and it's going to happen.
And I think we need to back up just for a second. Mm-hmm. We missed a couple of points on electric at them, and the problem with them right now. Because a lot of people are really pushing hard to get more electric out, and in the timeline that we discussed earlier. There's a couple of problems with that. Just because you're electric doesn't mean you're zero emissions.
Oh, yeah.
The electricity has to come from somewhere, and typically it's still produced by coal-burning power plants. Yes, there's wind power, there's solar power, and like there's water or dams, hydroelectric power. There are those, but still most of it comes from burning fuel. So you're just burning fuel in a different place, and you have to burn a lot of fuel to mine the elements to make batteries, which is another issue. The battery of an electric car has a certain lifespan, like the battery in your TV changer, your remote control, is going to give out sooner or later. There's no good way to dispose of electric car batteries now.
No.
They simply get put in containers and stored away, and hopefully they don't leak into the ground and pollute groundwater. But there's no way to really dispose of these things. And again, you still have to make the power by burning coal or burning fuel. Into that, the other problem with electric cars right now is we do not have the electric grid to charge these cars. Here in Texas, this past winter, we learned that we didn't have the power grid to support all the heaters we needed when we had an unprecedented snowstorm. We had 2 snow events in Texas.
And it was pretty scary for us because we're not used to this kind of thing. And I mean, it was like 15 degrees outside and the power was completely out. Yeah. Like you couldn't keep your houses warm or anything.
We were lucky. Ours didn't go out, but just across the street, our neighbor's power went out for 2 or 3 days. And that's really scary. And right now, we've read the grid's just not there. We can't put all these chargers in, because even if we could produce them and find places for them, the power grid, the supply, is not there to charge and keep all these electric cars going. So it's coming. Our point is that it is coming. The gasoline car is unfortunately going the way of the dinosaurs sooner or later, but maybe more later than sooner. Just from those struggles and those obstacles. And
then I just wanted to say one more thing. You're talking about the grid and different things. There is one electric vehicle out there that I think is so amazing right now, though. The new Lightning come out, the new Ford Lightning. And if your power goes out, your Lightning will power your house.
Yeah, which Lightning is? What's a Lightning? If somebody doesn't know.
It's a truck.
It's a truck. It's a new Ford F-150, fully electric.
Ford F-150. It's fully electric, and it's you're like, well, you can't the grid and stuff. Well, I guess if you do that, maybe it helps a little bit.
Maybe it does. Maybe it does. They claim that you can run your house off the batteries that are in that.
So
truck.
if all electric cars could do that, maybe we'd be a little different.
And I'm sure things are rapidly evolving, so they're working that direction. It's just not quite here yet.
Yeah, but it's going to happen. Yeah,
it is coming. For people who don't want to believe it, it's coming.
So I think that's it for our discussion on electric cars taking over. So we're going to take a quick break, and we'll be back with the closing.
So that's all we have for you this time.
Be sure to follow us on Facebook at Project Maynard's Thing, on Instagram at Project Maynard's Thing, and on YouTube by searching Project Maynard's Thing, and also on Twitter at Project Maynard1. Also, this month is the month of Maynard's Thing, and I'm raising money for the Mustard Dystrophy Association, and I want to break my all-time goal of raising money for the Mustard Dystrophy Association.
And there will be a link below to the New York Times article that we based the facts on.
Yes.
In this, and
there will also be a link to the Project Maynard's Thing website where you can help make donations and buy merch to help support me raising money for the Muscular Dystrophy Association.
And as Cody just stated, every dollar Project Maynard's Thing makes goes to is donate to the Muscular Dystrophy Association.
And so that's all we have for you, and we thank you for watching.